When Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany in 1934, it led to a new era of tragedy and destruction in Europe. By introducing the Nazi Party, Hitler announced to the world that he wanted to create an Aryan race that did not consist of the Jews. On September 15, 1935, the Nuremberg Laws were established. They revoked citizenship from the Jews, which was used as a basis for racial discrimination against them. Between the years of 1943 and 1945, approximately 20,000 concentration camps were built. Meanwhile, in America, under the presidency of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our government was well aware of this massive genocide, but was hesitant to act on behalf of the victims in Europe. Jan Karski, a non-Jewish and Polish liaison officer, came to the United States in 1943 to warn the West about the Holocaust. A special meeting between Karski and Roosevelt was arranged, but little was put into action until about a year later. What conflicts prevented the United States government and the people of America from saving innocent lives out of Hitler's grasp until the war was nearly over? Also, what conflicts prevented the refugees from becoming United States citizens after 18 months of internment? During the Holocaust, conflicts about the entry of Jewish refugees into the United States, ignoring the quota laws, resulted in the compromise of the Fort Ontario refugee shelter. The efforts by President Franklin Roosevelt and other world leaders to save the Jews in Europe began in July of 1938 with the International Evian Conference. During this important meeting, issues concerning whether or not the Jews could surpass the quota laws were discussed by representatives from 32 countries. After several weeks, every country had made a final decision not to allow any European refugees past their borders. Some of the earliest conflicts about admitting Jews into America after the rise of Hitler happened within America. Henry Morgenthau, the Secretary of Treasury, and John Peel, head of the War Refugee Board, believed that the people in Europe should be taken under our wing, while many others, including American citizens, did not. Anti-Semitism was a major conflict in the 1930s and 40s. For example, hateful cartoons and ideas were frequently printed in newspapers, describing the feelings of America towards refugees. Many job ads read, "Applications from Jews not desired." A group of people in Los Angeles even formed a Nazi movement to protest the entry of Jews into America. Also, the State Department and the War Department sabotaged rescue efforts of the Jews. In 1942, the government received cables from a German industrialist about the Nazis' use of prussic acid, and that millions of Jews had already died. The State Department never let it out to the public and called it a wild rumor inspired by Jewish fears. Many other cables explaining the plight of the Jews in Europe were also ignored and covered up. In an attempt to solve the refugee crisis, Executive Order 9417 created a War Refugee Board. Despite the work of its near 30 members, the efforts by the board were too little and too late because of the lack of cooperation and support. United States quota laws and visa restrictions were in great conflict with the aim of admitting any Jewish refugees. In 1921, the Emergency Quota Act had been established. The act allowed only a certain number of people from each country to enter the United States. Only 3% of the people in any national group already living in the United States could be admitted. This made the entry of Jews into America nearly impossible. Quota laws were then revised with the Immigration Act of 1924, which then brought the annual limit down to a mere 2%. This new law further cut immigration, especially from Eastern Europe, which was seen as a center of anarchism and communism. In the decades up to the Holocaust, the quota laws were barely changed. On June 12, 1944, Roosevelt declared a compromise. Under the influence of many different people, like Karski and Morgenthau, the decision had been made to allow 1,000 refugees from Europe temporarily stay in America as guests. It was planned that on July 20, 1944, the USS Henry Gibbons would sail from Naples, Italy.
When we got to Naples, we were put on the Henry Gibbons right away, and we sailed. We sailed in a convoy. I'm not sure, but I think it was 20 or some ships. And the two ships right next to us were ships that were bringing German prisoners of war here to work.
The group was 89% Jewish and came from 18 different nations. The most numerous mass of refugees came from Yugoslavia, Austria, Poland, Germany, and Czechoslovakia. Once at the shelter, the fugitives came under the jurisdiction of the War Relocation Authority, who received the job because they had operated the Japanese-American internment camps. Soon after the shelter opened, Army officials screened the refugees for security purposes. After that, they were allowed to leave the camp and go into the town of Oswego for a limit of 6 hours at a time. The refugees could not be employed outside the camp as well. Finally, to avoid criticism, the government provided minimum subsistence only. For example, the medical policy was to maintain the refugees in the same general condition in which they arrived, despite the years of deprivation and malnutrition that they had been given in Europe. After weeks of rest and feelings of safe being, the refugees began to feel stubborn about the restrictions in the camp. The tension in the shelter grew when the refugees were notified of their future and another conflict came about.
Everybody signed a document stating that we would be coming to the United States just for the duration of the war, and we would go back to Europe after the war ended. And that we were here as guests of President Roosevelt.
The major conflict emerged when the fight for American citizenship began. Even after 18 months of internment, under no circumstances could the refugees apply for citizenship. After President Roosevelt's death on April 12, 1945, the compromises to be made were up to the new president, Harry Truman. People such as the anti-Semitic Father Charles Colin, the leader of many anti-Semitic movements, like the social justice movement, wanted to eliminate the Jews from America. On the other hand, many people, including Eleanor Roosevelt, believed that the refugees should stay in America and become citizens. On the night of December 22, 1945, a compromise had finally been reached. It explained that the refugees would have to leave the country, re-enter, and apply for citizenship in America under the regular citizenship laws. This compromise was part of the Truman Directive, an order issued to set an international example by expediting the admission of displaced persons to the United States. For the first time since mid-1940, the U.S. immigration quotas were opened for full use. Concerning the refugees, Truman termed it inhumane and wasteful to make them go back to Europe, where they would almost immediately be eligible for immigration visas for the United States.
So they took us by bus to Canada, and we shook the hands of the American ambassador there. They gave us donuts and milk and cookies and sandwiches. And then we left and we crossed the Rainbow Bridge and came back into Buffalo, United States. And that's our first day of legal entry in the United States.
Finally, these immigrants could apply normally for citizenship and begin their new lives as Americans. In conclusion, during the appalling time of the Holocaust, a decision was made by the Roosevelt administration to permit in 1,000 refugees into our country into a temporary haven. After nearly 2 years of internment, the refugees soon received the rights they desired and began to feel at home in their new country. After new conflicts emerged concerning their stay in America and their citizenship, the next president, Harry Truman, made the heroic gesture to let the refugees stay in America under the current immigration laws. As said by Walter Greenberg, the big part of this
that we all did well. And I'm not talking about some people that made a lot of money. We have a number of multimillionaires in the group. We're talking about people that were devoted in being good people, civic-minded, and trying to give back to society because we were taught by parents how much society gave to us.